Hi, I'm Tom Williams. I'm an immigration attorney. I have over 25 years experience practicing immigration law and over 30 years practicing law generally. What I want to do in these videos is to answer some general questions that I hear frequently from clients. And I'm going to treat these videos in a very informal manner. I'm going to treat it as if somebody has called me on the telephone and has asked questions about their status, whether it's for an H-1B visa or what the requirements are. And I just want to give you some general bits of information that I would typically tell them in a conversation. So I want to give you some general points of interest about the H-1B visa. In another video, I did talk about what the requirements are and what an H-1B visa is. Here, I just want to hit some general points that might be of interest to you. Okay. One question I will hear is, do I have to have an H-1B visa before I apply for my green card? And I will give presentations to students, and I've given presentations to student groups at Harvard and MIT and Stanford and various schools across the country. And I will hear that asked. The students will ask, I'm on an F1 student visa now. Don't I have to apply for the H-1B, and how long do I have to hold the H-1 before I can apply for my green card? And the answer is that you do not necessarily need an H-1B visa. What you have to do is remain in status. Now, if you're able to do that while you are on your F1, say on your OPT, or if you're eligible for extension of your OPT under the STEM programs, and if you've got a graduate degree, master's degree, then you might actually be able to go straight from F1 student visa to the green card, or at least the stage you need to reach in the application process for the green card, without ever applying for the H-1. So there's no legal requirement that you apply or have applied for the H-1 in order to start the process for the green card. Okay. Now, why would you apply for the green card? If you've got an advantage of applying for the green card or the H-1, you might say, well, should I apply for the H-1? There actually can be an advantage in applying for the H-1, and that is that there is no backlog in the H-1B process like there is in the green card process. Now, if you have a bachelor's degree and you're going to qualify under the EB-3 classification, and I'm assuming you may or may not know what the EB-3 classification is. But if you do, then you know that there is a multi-year backlog in that. Whereas, if you apply for an H-1B visa, there is no backlog. If the quota has not been met and they accept your H-1B petition, then you will be able to file the petition and remain in status. Now, another big advantage of the H-1 is that the employer does not have to go through any recruitment steps and does not have to file a labor certification with the Department of Labor. As I have explained in another video, there are three basic requirements for the H-1. One is, do you have at least a 4-year bachelor's degree in a specific major or related major that is required by the job that is offered to you? Number two, does the job qualify? That is, does the job require anyone, even an American, to have at least a 4-year bachelor's degree in a specific major? And then three, there has to be an appropriate minimum salary that is offered to you. Other than that, you do not have to attempt to recruit or run ads in the newspaper or wait until your filing date is reached. Okay? Basically, there is no backlog or waiting line for the H-1B visas. But there is a cap, and you have to be very, very careful to make sure that there are H-1s that are available to you at the time that you file your petition. Okay. Now, I mentioned the cap. Let me explain that the visa cap does not apply to people who already have an H-1B and they're either filing for their extension of their status or a new company has offered them a job and is willing to petition them for a new H-1. The visa cap only applies to people who are either changing their status, say F1 to an H-1, or persons who are applying for H-1 without having that status already. Okay, so they're changing their status, or they're outside the country and they're coming to the U.S. for the first time on H-1. Those people have to be aware of the availability of H-1s. But again, there's no advertising required, no recruitment that's required. There's no backlog like there is for the EB-2s and the EB-3s. Okay. Now let's talk also, we'll go a little bit farther talking about the cap of the H-1s. If the cap or the quota has been met for the current year, that is all 65,000 or 85,000 H-1 petitions have been spoken for and they're no longer available, then if you file your H-1 petition, let's say you are in February, and the quota has been used up, then the earliest that you can get an H-1 is the beginning of the next fiscal year of the government, and that is October 1. They run on October 1 through end of September year, not a calendar year. So if you were applying in February, but the quota was used up in December, you may not file your application. The first date that you can file your application is 6 months before the October 1 beginning of the fiscal year. So you can file on or after April 1. But you've got to keep in mind that although the Immigration Service will accept your application on April 1, the effective date of your H-1 is not going to be until the following October 1st. Now, generally speaking, if there is a gap in the period where your present status expires, let's say assuming that you're on an F1 and you're on your OPT, and your OPT will expire in May or June or July. And as long as you have filed the H-1 petition before the expiration of your OPT period, so that means sometime after April 1, assuming that the quota had been met, so you can't file before. If the quota has not been met, then you can file anytime. The April 1 date does not apply. But assuming that the quota has been met for the current year, then you're going to have to wait until the next numbers take effect, which again is October 1, earliest filing date is April 1st. So let's assume that on April 1 or 2, you are able to file your H-1B petition. But you know that your F-1 status will only run until May or June when your OPT or your EAD expires. What happens in the meantime? You've got a gap between the expiration of your F1 and the start of your H1. The H1 technically does not kick in until October 1. So the Immigration Service has said, well, although we're not legally required to, it doesn't make any sense for the person to go back home. There's some OPTs that will run out around August or September. And actually, you are entitled to add an additional 60 days beyond your OPT period. So actually that gap between the expiration of your F1 status and the beginning of the H1 could be fairly small. So what Immigration Service has said is as long as you file your H1 petition before the expiration of your present status, even though the effective date of the H1 is not until October 1, they will let you stay here. They call that the cap gap. Okay, but keep in mind that you may not work, you may not be employed beyond the date of the expiration of your EAD, Employment Authorization Document, and you may not beyond that date and before the start of your H1. So you can stay here, but you may not work during that period of time.